Do you think feeding your cat wet food is just a simple upgrade, like swapping dry kibble for something tastier? Because what if that assumption is completely wrong? What if, the moment you started feeding wet food regularly, something inside your cat quietly began to change? Not just in their body, but in the way they experience you, their environment, and even their daily instincts. Most people never question it. You open a pouch, your cat eats happily, and the moment feels normal, safe, routine. But behind that simple interaction, there is a deeper shift happening that almost no one notices until it's already established. And once you understand it, you may never see feeding time the same way again. Because this isn't just about food, it's about behavior, biology, and something closer to instinctual programming. Let's go deeper. The first thing you need to understand is this. You think your cat is simply eating wet food because it tastes better. But actually, their entire feeding behavior is being reshaped by how their brain interprets it. When you first switch to wet food, everything feels familiar. Your cat shows excitement, comes running, eats eagerly, and you assume it's just preference. But what's actually happening is far more layered. Your cat isn't just responding to taste. They are responding to sensory intensity. Wet food releases a stronger smell profile than dry food. And in the feline world, smell is not just attraction, it is information. It tells them what is safe, what is fresh, what is valuable. So while you think your cat is just enjoying a meal, what's actually happening is that their brain is registering wet food as a higher value event. Not just food, but something closer to a biologically important reward. And that changes everything that comes next. But what happens next is even stranger. Because once wet food becomes a daily habit, your cat's hydration system begins to shift in ways most owners never think about. You think cats naturally drink enough water when they're thirsty, but actually cats are biologically designed with a very weak thirst drive. In the wild, they get most of their hydration from prey, not water bowls. So when you feed dry food, your cat is often living slightly underhydrated without showing obvious signs. But when you introduce wet food daily, something subtle changes. Their body stops relying on seeking water as much and starts relying on food as hydration, and this creates a hidden internal shift. Over time, their kidneys, urinary system, and digestion begin operating under a more natural hydration rhythm. Not dramatic, not visible overnight, but gradual and steady. It's not that your cat suddenly becomes healthier in a visible way. It's that their body stops compensating for a missing piece. And that quiet correction is something most people never notice until it's gone. But here's where things get even more interesting, because you think feeding wet food is only affecting your cat's body, but actually it is also changing their emotional relationship with you. Every time you prepare wet food, open a packet, or serve a bowl, you are not just feeding them. You are becoming part of their reward system, and that matters more than you think. Now let's go deeper into something most people completely misinterpret: your cat's anticipation. At first you think your cat is just excited for food, but actually their brain begins to build a stronger association between you and high-value satisfaction. You become the signal that something important is about to happen. And that's why, after switching to wet food, many cat owners notice something subtle but consistent. Their cat becomes more attentive to them around feeding time, more present, more reactive, sometimes even more vocal. You think it's just begging behavior, but actually it's learned emotional timing. Your presence becomes predictive of reward, and that reshapes behavior in a quiet but powerful way. But what happens next is even more overlooked. Because once wet food becomes routine, your cat's eating behavior itself begins to change. You think cats eat simply to satisfy hunger, but actually cats are highly ritual-based eaters. They don't just consume food, they experience it. Wet food introduces texture, aroma, and moisture that create a more immersive feeding experience. And this changes how quickly they eat, how focused they are, and even how satisfied they feel afterward. Some cats begin eating more slowly, more deliberately. Others become more eager and structured around meal times, but either way, something important is happening. Feeding is no longer just survival, it becomes ritual. And rituals are powerful in animal behavior because they create stability. But there's a hidden side to this too. Because increased food ritual can also increase dependency on structure. Your cat begins to notice timing more precisely. Delays feel more significant. Expectations become stronger, and suddenly, feeding time is no longer just part of the day, it becomes a psychological anchor. Now here's something most people never connect: dental and sensory adaptation. You think wet food only affects hydration and taste, but actually it also changes how your cat uses their teeth and mouth over time. Dry food provides mechanical resistance. Wet food does not. So, while your cat enjoys softer meals, their chewing behavior adapts subtly, not harmful in itself, but different. And that difference shapes long-term oral habits and even feeding satisfaction cues. But the more important shift is not physical. It's sensory expectation. Your cat begins to associate food with stronger smell and texture stimulation, which means bland or low aroma food becomes less interesting over time. And that's why some cats become picky after switching diets. You think they are being difficult, but actually their sensory threshold has simply been raised. Now let's slow down for a moment, and because what we are really seeing here is not just nutrition, it's conditioning. And this is where things become emotionally important, because every feeding moment is not just about your cat's body, it is about trust reinforcement. Your cat does not understand calories, hydration charts, or nutrition science, but they do understand patterns. You appear, food appears, safety appears, and over time that pattern becomes emotional certainty. But here's the part almost no one talks about. When you consistently feed wet food, your cat begins to associate you with higher emotional value moments. Not just presence, but fulfillment. And that is why feeding time often becomes one of the strongest bonding windows between humans and cats. But there is one final layer, and this is where everything comes together. Because when you step back and look at the full picture, wet food is not just changing hydration, not just changing behavior, not just changing routine. It is subtly aligning your cat's instincts closer to what their biology expects in nature. Higher moisture, stronger scent, more natural eating experience, more immediate satisfaction. And in that alignment, something quiet happens. Your cat doesn't just eat better, they feel more stable in their environment. A more predictable world, more reliable food source, more consistent human interaction. And that stability translates into something deeper than health. It translates into trust. So when you open that pouch tomorrow and your cat comes running like always, it might seem like a simple daily habit. But underneath that moment, there is a long chain of biological signals, emotional conditioning, and instinctive alignment quietly unfolding. And maybe the most surprising truth of all is this. You think you are just feeding your cat wet food every day, but actually you are shaping how your cat experiences safety, bonding, and trust, one meal at a time. And once you realize that, even the smallest routine stops feeling small.